Hello and good evening. Welcome to another episode, third episode of Economic Review, an economics and politics podcast from UNU. I'm Uditha, the host. With me is Rumeth and Ladies and gentlemen, today is a bit of a decisive day. I would be underestimating a lot of things if I basically don't say that this day will decide a lot of things in the coming at least 5 years. And not just in the West, but also countries like Sri Lanka, India, the global South. I am, of course, talking about the US election. With two candidates pitted against each other, and with every other candidate trying to eat into their vote banks, this is a very tight race. If basically the exit polls and the surveys are anything to go by, while some polls suggest an outright victory for either of the two candidates, most mainstream polls predict a bit of a tie. Already, if I'm not mistaken, the first election result, which came to us, was essentially a tie between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump in New Hampshire. It remains to be seen whether we'll have this trend throughout the election. We are still getting the results. And it won't be at least until tomorrow when we'll know who the next president of the country may be. And even that isn't a guarantee. If past presidential elections in the US are anything to go by, we've seen elections where the president, the winner of the presidential election, was decided 5 weeks after the polls closed. I am, of course, talking about the 2000 presidential election, George Bush versus Al Gore. Without predicting any such outcome this time around, I'd like to seg into a broader discussion of what this election might mean for the rest of the world in terms of foreign policy and also possible outcomes in terms of either of the two candidates winning. So, without further ado, I'd like to invite Rumeth to step in and start the discussion. So, Rumeth, I think the first point would be this election is going to have a bit of a knock-on effect on foreign policy and basically on foreign relations, on international relations. Could you talk a little bit about what kind of impact this election is going to be on a global scale?
Yes, first of all, hello, Uditha, and thanks for having me again for this podcast. Yes, this will be a crucial election, not only for America, but also for the world, because we've had, a lot of things have happened since 2020 when Joe Biden was elected back in 2020. And this will decide the course of the nation, US and as well as the global order and how things will play out in the future course of events. Anyway, having said it's a tight race, Donald Trump may win. Kamala Harris also has a chance to win this election. My prediction is that I'm not I'm not supporting any candidate, but some polls suggest that Trump might get an outright majority in this election, but some polls say that a slim majority for Kamala Harris. Anyway, it's a tight race. Now the voting has started, and we might have a decision. Maybe not on the election day itself, but this election results may go into November 7th, 8th, or maybe 9th. So we can't decide, we can't tell who's going to win. So it's a crucial election, and let's see how things play out.
Yeah, so I'd like to get into the nuts and bolts and the specifics. Obviously, I think the two key foreign policy issues that have dominated the US presidential election this time around are, on the one hand, the Russia Ukraine war, and on the other hand, the Israel Palestine war. How do you see the candidates, each of the candidates, the two main candidates, basically their position on these conflicts, on these developments? And how do you see that reflected in their possible policies should they win election?
So Donald Trump has said that he will finish the Ukraine-Russia war within days if he is elected. But have you said that it's not realistic, that it might take some 2 to 3 years to get into a conclusion whether he's going to finish this war at once or try to come into peace terms with both Vladimir Putin and Zelensky. And Kamala Harris, her stance is different. I don't know what is. She has also said that she wishes to end the war in Ukraine as well as in Gaza. But we need to understand Kamala Harris has been in power at the VC capacity for the last 4 years, but she hasn't her administration hasn't done anything to stop the war. They have continued their support for Ukraine, and Russia is not happy with it. So I can't exactly say what's going to happen to the Russia-Ukraine war. Both candidates have said they are going to finish this war, and I think it's an election rhetoric rather than saying the reality of what they are going to do in the next 4 years. But Donald Trump has constantly, repeatedly said that he is trying to limit NATO's presence in Europe and also in Ukraine. But that is yet to be tested, whether he's going to finish this war or continue and support Ukraine in their fight for peace again, in their fight for peace against Russians.
The way Democrats look at the Russia-Ukraine war totally differently from the Republicans. The Republicans look at the Israeli-Palestine war somewhat differently, not totally, but somewhat differently from the Democrats. There's a fundamental support, there's a fundamental acknowledgement of Israel's quote unquote right to self-defense, even from the Democrats. But the differences between the two parties come out very clearly with the Russia-Ukraine war. Zelensky made it a point to meet Donald Trump. And Trump's reaction to that meeting was, this war should never have happened in the first place. Putin should never have been provoked into this war. And much later in a podcast, Donald Trump goes on record making some very unflattering remarks about Zelensky, saying that I'm paraphrasing what Trump said, but he basically said that Zelensky was a showman, a magician, because every time he comes to the US, he goes away with $1 billion. So there's that whole discrepancy between their rhetoric on the Russia-Ukraine war and on Israel-Palestine. But having said that, we've seen a lot of contradictions in this election cycle as well. We've seen a Muslims for Trump rally as well. So maybe you can actually reflect on some of those bizarre contradictions and maybe look at some of the swing states and key states that can actually decide this election in favor of either candidate.
So one classic example for this is Michigan. I think it has a lot of Muslim or Arab voters who have origins to Palestine, Palestine, and they have many of them have pledged their support towards Donald Trump because they are saying now they are not happy with the stance the Biden administration has taken with regard to this Gaza war. They are saying, even though they say that Kamala Harris is going to end this war, they don't believe on Kamala because Kamala has been in Biden's administration for the last 5 years, but she has done nothing but aggravate the war in Gaza border. So again, they are pledging their support towards Trump because they believe that during Trump's administration, that was back from 2016 to 2020, there were no wars prevailing in Middle East, and that's why they are saying. And there was an Arab Accord. I think it was the Arab Accord that he initiated.
Abraham Accords.
Tried to Abraham Accords. That was the accord that he was trying to bring peace to the Middle East region. So it was
by basically normalizing Israeli relations with Arab countries.
So that was the stance back in before 2020, before Joe Biden was elected. And after Joe Biden was elected in 2020, we've seen that Afghanistan withdrawal and this Gaza war and this Ukraine war. So the world is more in a war position rather than a peaceful term right now. So I think that's why the Arab Americans are putting their bets on Donald Trump. They believe that he will finish this war and he will bring peace to Middle East so that it will be beneficial not only for the Americans but also for the Middle Eastern people and also the whole world as well. Because when the Middle East is in peace, it's easy for to do business, especially when it comes to oil prices. We've seen that there's been going up and down with this Russia gas tensions, and that might put an end to that fluctuations if the war is finished, if either candidate's stance is changed. So Donald Trump has constantly said that he's going to finish the Gaza border issue and try to bring peace into the Middle East. Kamala Harris has also said that, but it is yet to be seen.
How do you see the third party candidates? Each election cycle, the big ones, 2000, Bush, Al Gore. These were election or 1992, Clinton.
Pero, right? Ross Perot was in 2000 election as well.
No,
Was it Ross
Ross
Perot or someone
Perot,
else?
Ross Perot was 1992, and I think, to the best of my knowledge, I may be wrong on this, but basically Ross Perot basically upset the Republican vote in favor of Bill Clinton.
Yeah.
Conversely, in 2000, Ralph Nader upset the Democratic vote in favor of the Republicans. And now we have another candidate from the Green Party, Jill Stein, actually coming up with more concrete and more humanitarian stances on the Gaza war, and basically targeting swing states like Michigan, which basically has a huge Arab American and Palestinian American electorate. So, how do you see third party candidates figuring in this election? I think,
Uh,
and I'll make my point before I go to you. Basically, historically, since 2000, third party candidates have worked against the Democrats. Do you see a repetition of this time around as well? Probably.
I don't think that I mean, historically, if you take third party candidates have had influence in the US election, especially in 1990s and also in 2000, when when George W. Bush versus Al Gore election was happening, third party candidates may have had some saying because that was the closest president election in recent US history. I think, right? It was the closest one back in 2000. So this time around, when Robert F. Kennedy was still a candidate, people believed that he would sway some Democrat votes out of their bloc into his bloc. But after he endorsed Donald Trump, now I believe that some of the third party votes, which may have been Democrat votes for this election, might be voting for Trump. But apart from Robert F. Kennedy, I don't think other candidates may make a major disruption into Republican and Democrat votes because they haven't been publicly. I mean, media outlets haven't had a word about third parties just as they were in 2016 and 2020. So my view is I don't think third party candidates will make a major influence in this election. So whatever the votes that will go, that will break down into Democrats and Republicans, even though it's tight. But I don't think third party candidates will have their voice in this election. I mean, there are
I
major
think we'll,
concerns other than the third candidates.
yeah, I think we'll obviously see whether or not they had an influence when the election results start coming in. But, I think one key state that we need to look at would be Pennsylvania. So I'd like you, basically, perhaps you can explain a little bit on how Pennsylvania might figure in the final election result.
So Pennsylvania is crucial because it has 19 electoral votes. So in US elections, as you know now, the national votes don't matter. It matters. What matters is the electoral college. So Pennsylvania has 19 electoral votes. I mean, several media outlets have said that this state is tight, but independent media, not independent YouTubers, have also said that Donald Trump might win this election. Again, I'm not biasing towards Donald Trump, but what I see is Pennsylvania is a crucial state because it's an industrial hub in US, and they have seen that Pennsylvania through the history, the influence has been going down rather than going up. So that's why I think they are bidding their bets on Trump rather than Kamala. So remember, back in 2020, why Joe Biden won Pennsylvania was it was his hometown. Philadelphia is inside Pennsylvania, so that's why he got all the 19 electoral back in 2020. But now this time the scenario is different. You don't have Joe Biden. I haven't seen Joe Biden campaigning hardly for Kamala Harris in Pennsylvania. So Donald Trump had his one of his rallies yesterday at Pennsylvania, and he also said that go out and vote. We might win this election. Kamala Harris also has had some election campaigning done in Pennsylvania, but I can't exactly say because this has been going both ways. If you take the polling market, they have just 2 days back, they said that Kamala Harris had just flipped the Pennsylvania seat. But after that, after like 10 to 14 hours, they said Trump is back in lead. Again, I think what my opinion is whoever wins Pennsylvania will win this election because it has close to 20 electoral votes. So when we come into the stage where both candidates are in a position like 230 equal, then a state like Pennsylvania will have their say because it has 20 votes, and that will definitely help both candidates to get into to pass that 270 mark.
Right. I mean, interesting observations, but again, we'll see how things roll out in the over the next few days. Now, very quickly, Rumeth, I think within about 5 minutes, could you explain what you feel about, the next big election for us in Sri Lanka, the general election next week on the 14th? Obviously, the results will come within 24, if not 36 hours. But how do you see the dynamics play out in this election?
So I think this is the silent, I mean, the silent election that I mean, the peaceful general election we'll have in, I mean, in the whole course of our history, because it has never been silent during a general election cycle back in Sri Lanka. But now this time around, people are not that much concerned with general election here in Sri Lanka, because I think they do know what the outcome is. Everyone is predicting, I think, yeah, today Nikkei Asia also said that NPP we might get more than 130 seats in the general elections, but we can't be optimistic. They might get a majority, but we don't know the exact number that how are they going to get. So anyway, my assumption is also the same. NPP will get a majority, but I don't think it will be a two-third majority as said by AKD and NPP politicians. They are expecting a two-third majority, but that is they are being too optimistic about the number of seats that they are expecting. So anyway, NPP does have the lead because people believe that the AKD should have a strong government to implement what is going to implement in the next 4 years. So that is the rhetoric that's going inside Sri Lanka people Sri Lanka's minds, and we'll see how things play out. Anyway, NPP's majority is seen as a reality in the future in the general elections, but we have to wait and see how the opposition plays out. They haven't been strong, but they might get some seats as well.
Yeah, so interesting prognosis, and I think the next time I see you, we'll have a prognosis on the results of both the elections that we covered in this session. So, with regard to the US election, I think the safest and most diplomatic prediction would be, it's going to be either the first woman candidate or rather the first woman president or second Trump
Yeah.
presidency. Because this
Yes.
is the US.
Yeah.
In the US, there is
Another
no
point
space.
Another point I could mention was that the business world, they have placed their bets on Donald Trump because they think that Trump is more good for the economy rather than Kamala. If you take Poly market, which is the world's largest prediction market, I guess they have placed their bets on Donald Trump for the last 30 days. And also the stock market, when the stock market closed yesterday, I think they were rallying for a Trump victory. So if Trump doesn't get the majority, we might see a decline in the US stock exchange. But again, having said that, this can go either way. The Asian markets have also reacted towards a Trump victory. China is also expecting a Trump victory. But anyway, Kamala might make an upset and win this election. It's a possibility. But the financial markets are suggesting a Trump victory. But the other part of if you take the domestic issues in US, the abortion and other facts, I think Kamala does have the edge, especially when it comes to the environmental and abortion rights. But having said that, it's too early to call about what's going to happen. It's a tight race. It will go down into wire. I think none of the candidates will get an outright majority. It's a slim lead that either of the candidates will get.
Indeed, I think slim and tight are two words we can use on the US election. Of course, the Sri Lankan election is completely different, where we are going to see a majority, just not the majority that a lot of folks are hoping. Let's see how things pan out. I mean, obviously, this time next week, we'll probably see a huge deluge of election results coming in from Sri Lanka. Thank you so much, Rumeth, for joining and basically sharing your insights in this episode of Economic Review. I think within over the next 48 hours, probably we will see who takes on the mantle of the world's most consequential job, who's the President of the United States. Like I said, it can be either the first woman president or a second Trump presidency, but all bets and rather all cards are on the table. So thank you so much, Rumeth, for joining. And thank you for joining us, folks. We'll see you again in another 2-3 weeks, hopefully with a prognosis on a post-mortem on the US and the Sri Lankan elections.
Thank you.
Yeah, see you.